A fire broke out in a nearby alley, and a frightened boy screamed for help. Without hesitation, the foster boy ran into the smoke and flames, ignoring the danger. He dragged the child to safety, coughing and blistered but alive. The crowd watching gasped, realizing that this small, overlooked boy had become a quiet hero. For the first time, he saw a flicker of respect in the eyes of those who had mocked him. It was not loud, not grand, but it was real. He felt the pulse of purpose surge through him, the same pulse that had carried him from the cold hospital room to this moment of bravery. Word of his courage spread slowly, carried by whispers and murmurs. The boy no longer walked unnoticed. Eyes followed him, some in admiration, others in suspicion. He did not seek attention, yet it found him, and with it came a sense of responsibility heavier than any burden he had ever known. He spent nights reflecting on what had changed. The world could be cruel, yes, but it could also recognize goodness. He understood that he was no longer just a survivor. He was becoming someone who could shape the lives of others, someone who could matter. But to truly understand how this moment came to be, we must return to the very beginning. He was born into a world that seemed to have no room for him. The hospital room was cold and sterile, and the sound of his tiny cries echoed like a desperate plea no one answered. His mother, weak and trembling, barely had the strength to whisper his name, Elias Carter. She looked at it with a flicker of hope that vanished as soon as the nurse's pitying eyes fell on him. His father had already disappeared, leaving a void too vast for anyone to fill. The nurses whispered behind their hands, exchanging glances that stung like cold knives. Even as an infant, he felt the chill of rejection, though he could not yet understand it. The baby's mother died shortly after childbirth due to severe complications and untreated internal bleeding. She was alone, uninsured, and medically neglected, and by the time help came, it was already too late. Before she passed, she begged the nurses not to let her baby end up on the streets. With no father on record and no relatives willing to come forward, the hospital was forced to look for anyone at all, who would take the child. That was when they contacted an elderly, poor woman, a distant acquaintance in the same struggling neighborhood, who had once helped the mother with food and shelter. Despite her frailty and poverty, in the end, only the woman agreed to take the baby and raise him as her own, an old, poor, frail woman whose back was already bent by life, but whose heart still had room for one more abandoned soul. He was handed over to the only person willing to care for him, an old, frail woman whose back bent under the weight of years and hardship. Her hands shook as she fed him, but there was fire in her eyes, a promise that he would never feel the emptiness she had endured. She wrapped him in the smallest blanket she owned, and for the first time he felt the warmth of belonging. The tiny home was crumbling, yet in the quiet corners, laughter tried to bloom. The boy clung to her every word and touch, as if his very survival depended on it. But hunger and cold were constant threats, reminding them both that life outside the door was harsh and unforgiving. School was another battlefield. Children stared, whispered, and laughed at him, calling him the unwanted one. Every day, he felt the sting of humiliation and isolation, yet he learned quickly to hide his tears behind a fragile smile. The world seemed to measure him only by what he lacked, never by the heart he carried. Yet even in the darkest moments, a spark of resilience grew inside him. He watched the kindness others showed to strangers and vowed that if he survived, he would never let someone feel the same loneliness he endured. The lesson was small but powerful. Even the unwanted could choose to be extraordinary. Nights were the hardest. The streets outside whispered threats of hunger and danger, while inside, the old woman sang lullabies that were more prayer than song. He clutched her hand, feeling the rhythm of her heartbeat, like a shield against a world that had rejected him. Every note was a promise that he was seen, if not by the world, at least by her. But dreams were fragile. Often he woke to an empty home, food barely enough for one, and the gnawing ache of loneliness. Still, each morning he rose, determined to face the day, carrying the small light of hope she had nurtured in him. One bitter winter morning, Frost clung to the edges of the broken windows like icy fingers. He shivered, holding the old woman's worn coat close around him. Each breath was a struggle, but the thought of giving up never crossed his mind. Giving him meant letting the world win. At school, the cruelty continued. A group of boys pushed him to the ground, laughing as his knees scraped the cold, hard floor. He rose slowly, cheeks wet with tears he refused to show. Deep inside, a quiet determination began to grow. He would survive, not for himself, but for the woman who loved him when no one else would. One afternoon, while collecting firewood in the freezing alleyways, he stumbled upon a stray puppy shivering in the snow. Its tiny whimpers mirrored his own pain, and without hesitation, he scooped it into his coat, warmth returning to his heart in the smallest of ways. Back at the crumbling home, the puppy nestled beside him, and the old woman's eyes glistened with tears she tried to hide. That day, he learned that kindness, no matter how small, could be a lifeline in a world that often felt cruel and unforgiving. Rumors spread at school that he was destined to fail, that he would never amount to anything. Teachers dismissed him, and peers sneered with cruel certainty. Every morning, the boy forced himself to rise, holding on to a fragile belief that life had a purpose for him, though he could not yet see it. Late at night, he wrote small letters in his mind to universe, promising that someday he would prove them wrong. Each whispered vow was a spark, slowly turning into a fire that no one could extinguish. Not the harsh streets, not the cold stares, not the absence of father's hand. The old woman grew ill, her frailty worsening with each passing day. He carried water for her, fed her when she could barely lift a spoon, and prayed in silence, wishing for a miracle that never came. The house seemed emptier with each labored breath she drew, and he clung to her hand as if letting go would mean letting life itself slip away. One night, she whispered his name softly. "Promise me," she said, voice trembling, "that you will always help those who have no one." He nodded, tears streaming down his cheeks, vowing that her love and guidance would shape every step he took from that moment onward. When she passed, the boy felt a hollow emptiness that no words could describe. Her absence was a shadow that seemed to follow him, cold and relentless. Yet buried within his grief was a quiet determination. He would honor her memory by living the life she had wished for him, a life full of kindness, courage, and compassion. He wandered the streets aimlessly at first, facing hunger and scorn alone. But in every act of cruelty thrown at him, he found a lesson, and in every small act of kindness he could offer, he felt the old woman's presence guiding him. A local shopkeeper, noticing the boy's struggles, offered him a small job, sweeping the floors and carrying crates. It was menial work, but it gave him purpose. Each coin he earned was a small victory, a reminder that even the most overlooked people could find dignity in effort. The boy worked tirelessly, never complaining, always remembering the promise he had made to the woman who had loved him unconditionally. Each day, his resolve strengthened, and though the town still whispered cruelly, a quiet light began to shine in his eyes, one that would not be dimmed. The boy discovered an abandoned playground, broken swings creaking in the wind. He imagined children laughing there, families celebrating, and felt a pang of longing. Yet even alone, he climbed the rusted slide, pretending the laughter was his, letting himself believe in a world that had not yet rejected him entirely. Every day he returned, sweeping the leaves and fixing what he could. The small act of care made him feel alive, like he was quietly shaping a world that had once cast him aside. It was here, among broken swings and silent laughter, that he began to understand the power of hope. A stray cat appeared one chilly morning, its fur matted and eyes wary. The boy knelt in the dirt, extending his hand slowly. It was a moment of mutual understanding. Both had known rejection. Both had learned to survive alone. With a gentle pat, the boy welcomed the cat into his world, naming it Shadow for the life it had endured unnoticed. Shadow followed him everywhere, a quiet companion, in a world that had offered him few friends. The old woman's voice echoed in his memory. Always help those who have no one. He realized that even the smallest creature could be a recipient of kindness, and in giving, he felt something fill the emptiness in his chest. Winter came harsh and unrelenting, painting the town in shades of gray. The boy shivered through nights with no fire, dreaming of warmth of family, of a place where he belonged. Each morning, he rose with frostbitten fingers, determined not to let the cold steal his spirit. At school, he endured more cruelty. Laughter, mockery, whispers, all aimed to break him. Yet every insult became fuel for his resolve. He vowed that someday he would show the world that he was more than its judgment, that his heart was stronger than their cruelty. One day, he found a young girl crying by the riverbank. Her doll had fallen into the freezing water, and she could not reach it. Without hesitation, he plunged in, feeling the icy currents bite his skin, yet refusing to let her tears fall unanswered. Emerging with the doll, he handed it to her with a smile, hiding his own shivering hands beneath the coat. The girl's mother watched silently, eyes wide with gratitude. That single act rippled through him, a small taste of the purpose he could bring to the world. For the first time, he understood that kindness was a strength, not a weakness, and could shine even in the harshest winters. The old woman's passing weighed heavier each day, a silent ache that followed him everywhere. He wandered streets and alleys, clutching memories like precious stones. Nights were endless, and sometimes he cried himself to sleep, whispering promises he hoped the world would someday understand. Yet within his grief, a quiet courage was born. Each step he took was a tribute to her, each small act of bravery a testament to her belief in him. He realized that he carried her love within him, and no cruelty or absence could ever take it away. A fire broke out in a nearby alley, and a frightened boy screamed for help. Without hesitation, the foster boy ran into the smoke and flames, ignoring the danger. He dragged the child to safety, coughing and blistered, but alive. The crowd watching gasped, realizing that the small, overlooked boy had become a quiet hero. For the first time, he saw a flicker of respect in the eyes of those who had mocked him. It was not loud, not grand, but it was real. He felt the pulse of purpose surge through him, the same pulse that had carried him from the cold hospital room to this moment of bravery. Word of his courage spread slowly, carried by whispers and murmurs. The boy no longer walked unnoticed. Eyes followed him, some in admiration, others in suspicion. He did not seek attention, yet it found him, and with it came a sense of responsibility heavier than any burden he had ever known. He spent nights reflecting on what had changed. The world could be cruel, yes, but it could also recognize goodness. He understood that he was no longer just a survivor. He was becoming someone who could shape the lives of others, someone who could matter. One harsh evening, a storm tore through the town, flooding streets and toppling fences. The boy rushed through the torrential rain, helping neighbors salvage what they could. Each soaked step reminded him of the old woman's promise, always help those who have no one. Her words guided him like a lighthouse in the tempest. By morning, the town saw him differently. He had risked his life for people who had ignored him, people who had whispered that he would never succeed. In that moment, he realized that kindness could not only survive cruelty, but could shine brighter because of it. A teacher who had once dismissed him approached cautiously, offering a rare compliment. "You have courage," she said quietly, almost in awe. The boy nodded, unsure how to respond, feeling warmth that he had long forgotten existed. For the first time, he considered that the world might hold pockets of understanding, waiting for those brave enough to reach them. That night, he wrote in his journal, recounting each small victory, each rescued child, each act of care. He realized that every struggle had built the foundation for who he was becoming, a man shaped not by cruelty, but by compassion. The winter thawed, and with it, the streets softened under the spring sun. Children played openly, and the boy found himself joining them, not because he sought attention, but because he had earned the right to belong. Each laugh and smile he shared stitched the wounds of years spent in isolation. He understood now that life's harshness could not dictate his spirit. Each act of courage and kindness had created a ripple, changing not just his life, but the town itself. In the quiet of the evening, He felt the old woman's presence, smiling, proud, and never gone. A sudden illness swept through the town, leaving many bedridden. The boy, now older, volunteered to deliver food and medicine, carrying baskets heavy with the weight of responsibility and compassion. Each step through the sickened streets reminded him of the cold hospital room, where life had first seemed impossible. Neighbors watched silently as he moved tirelessly, offering help without complaint. He did not seek gratitude, yet it followed him, a quiet testament to a heart forged in adversity and hardened in love. Late one evening, he found a young boy crying in an empty alley, abandoned like he once was. Memories of his own loneliness surged, and without hesitation, he wrapped the child in his coat, whispering promises of safety and care. It was a simple act, yet profound, a circle of compassion continuing. The child clung to him as though he were the only anchor in a stormy sea. And in that embrace, the boy realized that he was no longer just surviving. He was creating hope, giving life the kindness that had once been offered to him. A wealthy man, lost and injured on a snowy street, was helped by the boy when no one else dared to approach. Carrying him to safety, he ignored the ridicule of passers-by and the bitter cold biting his hands. The man's grateful eyes reflected disbelief and awe, as if the world had finally noticed what he had always been. That night, as he returned home, wet and exhausted, he felt an unfamiliar pride. He had become more than a town's overlooked foster child. He had become a lifeline, a quiet force that could bend the world toward goodness. News of his deeds spread, whispers turning into stories, stories into admiration. Children who had mocked him now watched in awe. Adults who had ignored him now nodded respectfully as he passed. The world was slowly learning what he already knew. Courage and kindness were not defined by birth, but by action. The boy, now on the brink of adolescence, reflected on the journey. From the cold hospital room to the streets of the town, he had carried a heart untouched by bitterness, proving that resilience and love could overcome even the deepest wounds. A fire at the orphanage where he had once stayed required immediate help. He raced through smoke and heat, pulling children to safety. Every scream and every tear reminded him of the times he had been ignored, the times he had longed for a hand to guide him. By the time the flames were extinguished, he had saved more lives than he could count. Exhausted, soot-streaked, and blistered, he realized that this was his purpose, to act where others hesitated, to be the hand he had once needed. One rainy night, he found a homeless family shivering under a bridge. Their fear mirrored his own past, and he offered his coat and blankets without hesitation. Each act of care was a brick, building a life of purpose from the rubble of his childhood. He began to see a pattern. His suffering was not in vain. Every hardship, every act of cruelty had prepared him to understand, to feel, and to act. Kindness, he realized, could be stronger than any obstacle. The town's people, who once ignored him, began sharing stories of his heroism. Quietly, his deeds became legends whispered in alleys and streets. Children admired him secretly. Parents nodded in silent respect. And even teachers who had doubted him found themselves humbled. Through it all, he remained humble, never seeking praise, only silently fulfilling the promise he had made to the old woman, to help those who had no one, to be the light in the darkness. An elderly woman, struggling to carry firewood, was aided by him without a word. She looked into his eyes, and for a brief moment, the weight of her years seemed lighter. He had learned that sometimes the smallest gestures could heal the deepest wounds. Even as he helped, he remembered the nights of hunger and the cold streets. Each act was a tribute to the woman who had raised him, a silent thank you for her unwavering love and guidance. A flood struck the town unexpectedly, and he worked tirelessly, helping neighbors evacuate and salvage belongings. Each soaked step reminded him of the freezing hospital room of his birth, a world indifferent to his survival. Yet here he was, acting with courage and determination, transforming helplessness into hope. People began to see him not as a foster boy no one wanted, but as a symbol of resilience and kindness. One evening, he returned to the abandoned playground, now tended and blooming with small flowers he had planted. The swings creaked gently, and the laughter of imaginary children filled the air. He sat on the slide, letting memories wash over him. The pain, the hunger, the nights of tears, and the warmth of the old woman's hand. He realized that even in the harshest winters, life could bloom. His heart, once fragile and broken, now carried the strength to touch others, a strength born from suffering, love, and unwavering determination. A boy from the streets was bullied mercilessly, reminded of the scorn he himself had endured. The foster boy intervened, standing tall against the cruel laughter, shielding the boy with courage he had learned from years of survival. He remembered every moment of mockery, every night of tears, and vowed that no child would feel as he once had. That day, he became more than a hero. He became protector, a quiet guardian of the vulnerable. A firework accident threatened a neighborhood celebration, and he acted instinctively, rushing to pull children and adults away from danger. The crowd watched in awe, realizing the quiet boy they had ignored was capable of extraordinary bravery. As flames were doused and smoke cleared, he stood drenched, exhausted, and exhilarated. The town was beginning to see the man he was becoming, molded by pain yet softened by kindness. Winter returned with biting winds, and a lost puppy whimpered under the bridge. He knelt, coaxing it gently, and took it home. Its warmth reminded him of all the creatures, all the people, and all the moments he had saved, each act a continuation of the old woman's legacy. The puppy curled beside him that night, and for the first time, he felt complete, not because the world had accepted him, but because he had learned to give love freely, even when it had once been denied to him. A teacher, moved by his consistent courage and kindness, offered him books and encouragement. He devoured each page, learning not just from words, but from the understanding that someone believed in him. Education became a weapon against ignorance and scorn. Every lesson absorbed, every skill gained, was another step toward the man he was destined to be. During a town festival, a child wandered into danger, and he ran without hesitation to save her. Cheers erupted, but he ignored them, focused solely on the life he had rescued. It was instinct, honed through years of living where kindness had been rare. That night, as he lay down, he felt exhaustion mingled with satisfaction. His life, once full of neglect, now carried purpose, and each heartbeat echoed the lessons of resilience and compassion the old woman had taught him. The mayor, impressed by his bravery and selflessness, quietly acknowledged him. Invitations to community events and small honors followed, yet he remained humble, acting always from principle, never for recognition. Through each accolade, he remembered the hospital room, the cold streets, the nights of hunger. Every step forward was a tribute to survival, courage, and the quiet love that had once saved him. On the anniversary of the old woman's passing, he placed flowers at her grave, whispering words of gratitude. "I kept my promise," he said, tears streaming freely. The lesson she had taught him, the power of kindness, the strength of love, had become the blueprint of his life. The town, unaware of the silent mourning, saw only a man of courage and compassion. Yet within him, the memory of her voice, her hand, and her unwavering belief guided every step. An estranged relative tried to lure him away with promises of wealth and comfort. The boy felt the pull of temptation, but refused to abandon the town and the people who had finally begun to see his worth. His loyalty was not blind. It was forged in love, struggle, and the memory of the woman who had raised him. The town, witnessing his choices quietly, began to whisper of his integrity. No one could sway him. He was anchored in principles stronger than fear, greed, or envy. Years later, long after hunger and grief had hardened him, the boy discovered something that changed everything. Service had given him skills. From cleaning classrooms to fixing broken chairs, from helping teachers carry supplies to assisting neighbors with small repairs, he had unknowingly trained himself. A kind school counselor noticed his discipline and helped him apply for a small vocational scholarship. At night, under flickering streetlights, he studied tirelessly, his hands rough from labor, his eyes burning with the memory of a bent-backed woman who once believed in him when no one else did. His first job paid almost nothing. He worked longer hours than anyone else, never complained, never stole time. When others quit, he stayed. When machines broke, he learned how to fix them. When managers failed, he stepped in quietly. Slowly, people began to trust him. One opportunity led to another. A supervisor recommended him. A business owner mentored him. He saved every dollar, living as if poverty was still watching him from the shadows, afraid to ever return. The day he signed the papers to his own small company, his hands trembled, not from greed, but from gratitude. He didn't cry because he was rich. He cried because he was free. Free from hunger, free from shame, free from being forgotten. His success spread not through luxury, but through impact. Jobs created, students sponsored, widows helped. And every night before sleep, he whispered the same words he once promised the universe as a child. I kept my word. Standing at the edge of the town, he looked back at streets once filled with fear and neglect. Now, children laughed, families thrived, and hope flourished. Every hardship, tear, and act of compassion had built a life capable of inspiring generations. He smiled quietly, knowing that the boy who had been abandoned had become the man who saved the town. His journey was complete, a testament to the power of resilience, love, and unwavering courage. Please like and subscribe. This channel is new, but the story is powerful. Subscribe now, so you don't miss more interesting videos like this one coming your way. Like to support my hard work. Comment if you believe dreams should never be built on darkness. Your support means everything. Let's grow together.